The converted man here. Ethics are the systems that we hold to that allow us to have morals, broadly speaking. Different ethical systems exist, and it's possible that you have more than one ethical system, and it's also possible that even though you have a particular ethical system, you don't always adhere to it because selecting the ethical system is somewhat subjective. So ultimately, yes, morals can be seen as subjective in that sense that you subjectively picked your ethics. But I would say morals are objective in the sense that they point to the goal that the ethical system outlines for you. So morals are both objective and subjective, technically speaking. Just depends on how you look at it. But I'm here to talk about legalism and divine command theory. And let's just use Wikipedia. It's not terrible on these things. The legalism in the Western sense is the ethical attitude that holds moral conduct as a matter of rule following. It's an approach to an analysis of legal questions characterized by abstract logical reasoning, focused on applicable legal texts like constitution, legislation, case law, rather than on the social, economic, or political context, and it has occurred both in civil and common law traditions. It underlines both natural law and legal positivism. Its narrower versions, legalism, may endorse the notion that the pre-existing body of authority legal materials already contains a uniquely predetermined right to answer to any legal problem that may arise. Also typically claims the task of the judge is to ascertain the answer to a legal question by basically a mechanical process rather than some other process. So broadly speaking, legalism is in essence the simple idea of if it's against the law, it would be morally wrong to do it, and if it is within the law, then it is morally permissible to do it. So if you or somebody else breaks the law, that is immoral and must face some sort of consequence for doing that. And of course, of notice is the LA event that is going on. And well, there's a lot to unpack, but I'm not going to get into what's going on per se, but just use that as kind of a point of focus to say there are a lot of people that are using the ethical system of legalism, whether they know it or not, when they say, well, if the person is here illegally, then they have to be punished for that. And the punishment is to send them away, wherever that is, not here. And the emotional elements of that, or the social consequences of that, or any other questions about it, are rendered irrelevant because the ethical system of legalism says it's illegal, it's wrong, done, end of story. Oh, but they're really nice people. Doesn't matter. They broke the law. So that's it. And there is no if, and, or buts. And it is kind of a black and white thinking going on there to some extent. It's like, well, what about this circumstance? Or what about this? It's like, that's all whataboutism. Doesn't matter. They did this wrong thing. They go away. Period. Done. And it's like, man, that's pretty brutal. But it is logical if you're adhering to the legalism ethical system. It's like, well, they broke the law, they pay the price. And I'm a law-abiding citizen, or I try to be. If I break a law, it's by mistake because I didn't know. I try to do the best I know how to do. And so if I do something inappropriate, I expect that I'm going to face some consequence for it, and then fight my case in court, and maybe I'll win, maybe not, but I'm taking advantage of that legal system we have. Now, you might say, well, the maybe the people that are holding to legalism are saying, well, we're going to ignore these laws over here in regards to whether or not they should get a trial, because in this case you don't get a trial because if you're determined to be here illegally, you don't get a trial because that's how that goes. Or maybe they do get a trial, or maybe this, and so you might say, well, you're deciding when to apply legalism. And it's like, yeah, they are. And that can be totally, completely inconsistent. And logically speaking, it doesn't change the application of the ethics. Because somebody is inconsistent in their application of ethics, that doesn't make the ethics invalid, nor does it make the application invalid. It's like, well, you're being a hypocrite. You're applying it here, but not here. Well, yeah, they are being a hypocrite, but that's not illogical to be a hypocrite. It's just something we don't like when people do it. Shouldn't it be that they apply legalism across the board? Well, nobody says they have to. It just says that this is what the ethical system is, and whether they apply it all the time or not, that's up to each individual. So I think that what we see is a result of a number of people upholding to legalism, whether they know it or not, but only in this one case, or only for certain cases, and maybe they're being hypocritical, and it's like, why are you focusing on this, or why is this so important, or why does this matter? It's like, well, any other law, they would be just as vehement about, you would think. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. And it's hard to keep track because, unless you're, watching the actions of a given person and documenting it, you don't, there's no way to say, hey, look, you used it here, but you didn't use it there. And even if you could do that, the person be like, yeah, and so what? I can decide when to use this ethics or not. And that is rather flippant, isn't it? But, I don't know the answer to what to do about that. I'm just pointing out that human behavior is not necessarily logical, but this is an ethical system. So I want to contrast this ethical system to divine command theory. And divine command theory, let me pull that up. This one's a little bit more in depth than you saw how small legalism was. This one's got a lot more to it. It proposes that action status or morally good is whether or not it's commanded by God. I'm going to end there because there's a lot more it says, but that's the relevant part. Basically, in this ethics, if what is moral is whatever God says to do, and whatever it tells you to not do is immoral, and so that's it. You follow that system. So it's very much a black and white system, just like legalism. If it's against the law, you don't do it. If it's within the law, you can do it. In the other system, if God says to do it, you do it. If God says to not do it, you don't do it. And whether you like it or not, if you are adhering strictly to these ethical systems, which I already outlined, you don't necessarily have to, then you will do what you are told to do, whether you like it or not. So hypothetically, a police officer is under legalism ethics, and they're trying to follow the letter of the law, but there's also, of course, what's called the spirit of the law, and whether or not they, did they make a mistake there or not, and then the judge has to weigh in, and they're also applying the legalism to some extent, and but they're trying to weigh what's best for the person and what's best for the law, and so there's some leeway there. There's some flexibility there, but there isn't that in divine command theory. You have to do it. You have to do what you're told to do, or not do what you're told not to do, because it's more at stake than simply a fine or jail time. You're talking your eternal soul here that is going to be in the bad place or the good place forever because you made the wrong call, because you dared to not do what you were told to do, and God told you to do it. God said it, so you have to do it. Also, legalism has a difference in that you can change the law, we can change the law, hypothetically, and it's very difficult to do, but it can be done. But you can't do that with DCT. You can't change the commands that God has issued. Unless, of course, you're making up those commands in the first place, then I guess you get to decide what they are. But once they're set in stone, so to speak, it's very hard to change them. And over time, the 10 Commandments have altered, at least in some of their wording to some degree. And maybe if you were, patient enough and you had a printing company that printed Bibles, you could sneak in small changes to the wording of different commandments that over time and wouldn't be noticed, and that over time, generation after generation, you keep changing it so that eventually it's completely different than what it started out with, and nobody noticed because it was so subtle after, but then it takes take way long time and a lot of patience, a lot of effort and energy. And of course, there'd still be those who'd be like, well, we don't accept that version of the Bible anyway, so all your effort might be in vain. But also what's interesting is, so you can't really change God's mind, so to speak, but you can change the law. So it's best to adhere to the law, even though you don't agree with it, and then make your argument in court. And something similar to this was told to me when I was in the military once upon a time, where we were told, you follow the command. If you don't like it, you can take it up with whoever later on. But then I did say, but then surely there will be situations where it would be improper to follow the command if it's like clear and evident that it's the wrong thing to do. And it's like, yeah, that can happen. So it's like, well, wait a minute. So there are similarities in a way of both systems are about following some commandments, some rules. And both systems are rather rigid in a way, but there are differences in that, at least with legalism, you could choose to not adhere to it without any real consequence, whereas DCT proposes that there is a huge consequence for not adhering to the system. So there's like a existential crisis. Now, of course, in legalism, there is indeed a consequence for not following the laws, but viewing following the laws as moral or immoral is where the ethics come into play. And there does seem to be something about us humans where when we say something is immoral, in our head, if you will, in our feelings, we feel different about it than when it's just something that's, that is bad, or you shouldn't, and we weigh things at different levels too. Running a red light, that can be bad. I mean, if nobody was around, who cares, but deliberately causing harm to a human, that's pretty bad. That's really bad. Stealing some food to eat, if you were starving, yeah, okay, not terrible. Stealing money from just somebody random, not good. You know, um, you could even say, yeah, stealing from a bank if you were sure that you're only hurting the bank and nobody else. Well, that's better than stealing from individual. You stole from the rich and gave to the poor, so that's good. That's Robin Hood, right? Uh, well, was it good? Not under legalism. He was very wrong to do what he did. But you might say, but the whole system is wrong. So isn't it my duty to rebel against the system? Well, not if you're adhering to legalism, but you might think that laws that existed prior to now are actually the law with a capital T and L, and the current laws, those are all silly and made up. And there are people that are their own special breed of people called sovereign citizens who ascribe to absolute nonsense drivel that think that if you say certain things in certain ways and you use magical words that you don't have to have a license to drive, and you're not your name, and you can't be held accountable for X, Y, and Z. And it's just they want to be free to do whatever they want. They don't want to do what everyone else does. They want to be not under the system that everyone else is. And they think that they found a way around it, even though they haven't. And they always get in trouble with the law and the courts, and they always wind up in jail, and they never, ever, ever, ever successfully get their way, ever. And what they do is wind up tying up courts' time and wasting a whole bunch of taxpayers' money on that because frivolous lawsuits, which is weird because that they're using the system that they pretend doesn't really exist to some degree, and using laws inappropriately. So they certainly believe that their version of legal stuff is real, and then they apply that as a moral virtue to follow it. But nobody else agrees with them. So who's right? Majority rules, might makes right. Yeah, that seems to be the way it is. Whether that's right or not, well, that's hard to say without a different ethical system that isn't legalism or isn't DCT, some ethical system that would allow us to view ethical systems and determine whether they're good or bad. And that's, of course, meta ethics is like a study of ethics, and it's like, how do we determine what is good, bad, right, wrong, whatever in the first place? And of course, many people have written and said many things on that issue, and it's very complicated. So those are my thoughts on legalism and divine command theory, and doing my best to be neutral on the situation that's playing out. If you look at it from a legalism point of view, it's like, well, yeah, these people have done something illegal, so they have to pay the price, and that's it. And whether that's compassion or not doesn't matter, and oh well, I mean, you could just say that and be like, well, yeah, that's it. I just, or you could say, well, okay, legalism, but maybe we need soft legalism. You need a different ethical system. So, but knowing these ethical systems and labeling them properly and understanding that when we codify things as moral or virtuous or immoral, and that's going to affect our perception of each other and how to live in this world and how to deal with things and how to think about things, that helps us to understand each other's positions. And then perhaps to debate people on their position, because the best way to do that is to understand what it is they're arguing for in the first place and why. And here it is, a legal stance of it's legal to do this thing. So if you want to win that debate, the only way to actually do it would be to change the law and to have a different law that was more flexible than the current laws that exist are. You can't win the legalism debate unless the law allows for the thing that you want. So in a way, although we're still going to debate people that disagree with us, and I think there's a use for that, the way forward, if you really want significant change, is to get enough people together and change the law. There you go. And it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a long time. But that's it. You can still debate it, absolutely. But at the end of the day, people are going to view it as they want to, if they adhere to these principles of legalism. Okay, that's all I've got for now. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, be skeptical. And after next time, stay skeptical.